What really happens when a royal guest completely loses control, live on national television, turning a simple morning interview into a full-blown PR disaster? Buckle up, because what went down between Prince Harry and Savannah Guthrie on the Today Show was nothing short of explosive. We're talking about a meltdown so intense it ended with security stepping in and a royal guest being escorted out of the studio. But before we unpack this unbelievable moment, don't forget to hit unsubscribe and drop a comment below. What do you think triggered Harry's outburst? The morning started like any other at the Today Show studios in New York. Savannah Guthrie arrived early, reviewing her notes for what was supposed to be a light, feel-good interview. Prince Harry was there to promote his latest charitable projects, a friendly segment designed to highlight his humanitarian side. The production team had been told to expect a relaxed, upbeat conversation. Nothing controversial. But from the moment Harry arrived, 30 minutes late, things began to feel off. His usual charm was gone, replaced by a tense, distracted energy. Staff noticed him pacing, checking his phone, and offering little more than curt nods to those who greeted him. The makeup artist later shared that he was unusually difficult, fidgety, irritable, and critical of nearly everything: the lighting, the camera angles, even the chair placement. When a junior producer tried to adjust the setup, Harry reportedly snapped that American television doesn't understand proper protocol. Meanwhile, Savannah was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing backstage. Ever the professional, she'd come prepared with thoughtful questions about Harry's work and a few lighter topics about life in California. When the cameras started rolling, the tension in the room was palpable. Harry sat rigid, his jaw tight, his fingers gripping the armrests. The usual small talk before going live fell flat. His answers were clipped, his smile fleeting. At first, the interview seemed to hold together. Savannah's warm tone carried things through the opening questions, and Harry managed to keep up the facade. But subtle cracks began to show. His voice carried a sharp edge. His responses lacked enthusiasm. When Savannah asked about his adjustment to life in America, a simple, positive question, Harry's tone shifted. He spoke of constant scrutiny, of being watched and judged, his bitterness bleeding through. Savannah, maintaining her composure, tried to move things forward. Then came the breaking point. She asked about his family's support for his new ventures, a softball question meant to humanize him. Instead, Harry's entire demeanor changed. His shoulders tightened, his eyes narrowed, and his tone grew cold. He spoke of forging his own path, of not being able to rely on others, of making hard choices alone. He never named names, but the implication was clear. The tension was electric. Savannah tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground, but the damage was done. But it soon became clear that Prince Harry had no intention of sticking to the light, promotional tone everyone had expected. When Savannah asked about his future plans, Harry pivoted, launching into what could only be described as a thinly veiled tirade against his critics. He spoke about people who claimed to care while undermining his efforts, about the hypocrisy of those who preached family values but abandoned their own, and about the courage it took to stand alone for what was right. Around the studio, crew members exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer the interview they'd prepared for. Savannah, ever composed, tried several times to steer things back on track. But Harry seemed determined to use every question as ammunition. His voice grew louder, his gestures sharper, his frustration more obvious with each passing minute. When they finally cut to commercial break, Savannah leaned toward him, asking gently if everything was okay, if there was something he wanted to discuss off camera before they continued. Instead of taking the olive branch, Harry bristled. His reply was cold, almost mocking. He suggested that perhaps American journalists simply weren't equipped to handle serious conversations about real issues. The comment stung. Not only was it rude, it revealed a tone of arrogance that stood in stark contrast to the humble, service-oriented image he had so carefully cultivated. Savannah's expression barely shifted, but those watching closely could see the tension in her jaw as she absorbed the insult. By the time the cameras were ready to roll again, the atmosphere had shifted completely. What had begun as a friendly celebrity interview now felt more like a confrontation waiting to erupt. Harry leaned back in his chair, his expression challenging, daring Savannah to push him. The crew could sense it too. Something was about to break. When they returned from commercial, Savannah made one last attempt to save the segment. She asked about his charitable foundation's recent achievements, a neutral, uplifting topic designed to spotlight his positive work. But even this question seemed to hit a nerve. "You know, Savannah," Harry began, his voice edged with condescension, "I find it fascinating how American media always wants to focus on the feel-good stories while ignoring the systemic problems that make charity necessary in the first place. It's almost like you prefer surface-level conversations over real substance." Savannah blinked, taken aback. It wasn't just defensive, it was an outright attack disguised as an answer. She had interviewed politicians, world leaders, and celebrities for decades. She could handle difficult guests, but this was different. The hostility felt personal. Still, she kept her tone even. "Well, we certainly do cover serious issues here at Today," she said calmly. "But I thought today we'd focus on the positive impact of your work and how viewers can get involved." Harry laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "There it is again," he said. "You want to keep things light. God forbid we have an actual substantive conversation about why these problems exist. This," he gestured toward the cameras, "is exactly what I mean when I talk about the media's refusal to confront difficult truths." The accusation hung in the air like a fog. Savannah felt her patience tested in a way it rarely had been. For years, she'd made her career on thoughtful journalism and tough questions, and now, being lectured on media integrity by someone who'd never spent a day in the newsroom felt like a slap in the face. Her tone stayed steady, but viewers could hear the edge creeping in. "I'm not sure what you're suggesting, Harry," she replied evenly, her professionalism barely concealing the growing tension between them. They'd tackled plenty of difficult subjects on the show before, and Savannah had always prided herself on asking the questions that needed to be asked. "Have you, though?" Harry shot back, eyes narrowing. "Because from where I'm sitting, American television seems far more interested in entertainment than enlightenment. You want the celebrity, the royal connection, but not the uncomfortable truths that come with it." The studio fell silent, the only sound the low hum of the equipment. Even the camera operators, veterans of many tense broadcasts, began to shift uneasily. This was no longer just a difficult interview. It was turning into a public unraveling, live in front of millions. Savannah drew a slow breath, summoning every ounce of her professional composure. "I think you might be mischaracterizing both this show and this conversation, Harry. We invited you here to talk about your work and your perspective. If there are specific issues you'd like to address, I'm more than willing to explore them." "Oh, how generous of you," Harry replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You'll explore them, as if you're doing me a favor by letting me talk about things that actually matter. That's exactly the kind of patronizing attitude I've come to expect from people who think they're in charge." The remark crossed a line so sharply that for a moment, even Savannah didn't know how to respond. Heat rose in her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from anger at the sheer disrespect in her own studio. She had handled presidents, prime ministers, and crisis survivors. But this was something different. "I'm not quite sure what's happening here," she said finally, her voice calm but edged with steel. "But I think we should take a step back and remember that we're having a conversation, not a confrontation." Harry leaned forward, his tone turning sharper. "Are we having a conversation, Savannah? Because it feels more like you're trying to manage me, keep me in line, like some trained performer here for your audience's amusement." "That's absolutely not what's happening," Savannah said, her professionalism slipping just slightly into firmness. "I've treated you with nothing but respect since you walked in here." "Respect?" Harry's voice rose, forcing the audio text to scramble with the levels. "Is that what you call it when you reduce everything I care about into bite-sized feel-good segments? When you decide serious issues are too heavy for your morning show audience?" Savannah felt her patience starting to fracture. "Harry, I haven't dismissed anything. I've asked you thoughtful questions about your work. Instead of answering, you've chosen to attack me in this program. I'm not sure what you hope to accomplish here, but this isn't it." "There it is," Harry said, a smug smile tugging at his lips. "The real Savannah Guthrie. Scratch the surface and the polished facade falls apart. You can't handle being challenged, can you? You're used to guests who play along, who give you neat little sound bites for your highlight reels." The accusation was so blatantly unfair, so clearly meant to provoke, that Savannah had to fight to keep her composure. She'd faced world leaders, grilled evasive politicians, and covered tragedies in real time. Yet somehow Harry's arrogance was testing boundaries she didn't even know existed. "I think you're projecting quite a bit," she said evenly, her voice low but firm. "I've been nothing but professional with you, and I don't appreciate being lectured on journalism by someone who's never practiced it." Harry's eyes darkened. "Oh, so now we're talking qualifications?" He sneered. "That's rich, coming from someone who probably got her job because she knows how to smile at a camera better than she knows how to report." The words hit like a slap. Sexist, cruel, and calculated to undermine everything Savannah had built her career on. The silence in the studio was deafening as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Harry had crossed a line, blatantly, deliberately, and there was no pretending this was anything but a personal attack. Savannah's composure finally cracked, not into anger but into something colder, sharper, a quiet fury that made her voice deadly calm. "Excuse me? You heard me perfectly well," Harry said, oblivious to the danger he'd just walked into. "This entire industry runs on pretty faces and manufactured personalities. Real substance. Real courage to ask hard questions. That's a lot rarer than you'd like to admit." "I think," Savannah said evenly, her voice gaining a quiet authority that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. "You need to be very careful about what you say next." But Harry pressed on, too arrogant or too self-righteous to hear the warning. "Careful? Why should I be careful? Because I might upset the delicate sensibilities of morning television? Because I might say something that doesn't fit your comfortable little world where everyone pretends the truth doesn't exist?" The transformation in Savannah was visible. The warm, accommodating host vanished, replaced by the veteran journalist who'd stared down world leaders and war criminals alike. "Let me tell you something. Harry," she began, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "I've covered wars, natural disasters, presidential elections, Supreme Court rulings. I've interviewed heads of state, Nobel laureates, and yes, members of your own family who managed to conduct themselves with dignity and respect. So when you sit in that chair and suggest that I got my job because of my appearance, rather than 2 decades of hard work and journalistic integrity, you're not just insulting me, you're insulting every woman who's had to fight twice as hard to be taken seriously in this industry." Harry's face drained of color. He seemed to realize, too late, that he had not intimidated Savannah at all. He had awakened something far more formidable. "Now wait just a minute," he began. Savannah raised a hand, and the authority in the gesture stopped him cold. "No," she said. "You wait a minute. You came into my studio, were treated with courtesy and respect, and you've spent the last 20 minutes attacking me, this show, and American journalism as a whole. And for what? Because I asked you about your charity work? Because I tried to give you a platform to talk about the causes you claim to care about?" The cameras kept rolling. Every second of this exchange, tense, riveting, explosive, was being captured live. Harry sat frozen, struggling to comprehend that someone was finally standing up to him. "You want to talk about substance?" Savannah pressed. "You want difficult truths? Fine. Let's start with what just happened. You showed up late. You were rude to my staff. You turned every question into a complaint about your personal grievances. And when I tried to stay professional, you decided to question my qualifications, call me a pretty face reading a teleprompter. I never said, 'Oh.' But you did," Savannah cut in, her voice sharper now. "And you said it lived to millions of viewers. You thought you could come in here and steamroll an American journalist the way you've apparently done elsewhere. But this isn't one of those situations, and I'm not one of those people." The control room was silent, transfixed. Harry's usual charm and bravado were useless here. "I think you're overreacting," he said weakly. "I was just trying to have a meaningful conversation about serious issues." Savannah let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Meaningful conversation? Is that what you call telling me that American television doesn't understand serious issues? That I care more about entertainment than truth? That I probably got this job because of how I look?" She shook her head. "If that's your idea of meaningful conversation, I'd hate to see what you consider an insult." No one in the studio moved. They had never seen anything like this, someone being so thoroughly, so publicly dismantled on live television. Harry looked around, searching for an ally. There were none. Every eye was on Savannah. "You know what's really ironic, Harry?" she continued, leaning forward. "You came here to talk about your charitable work. about service, compassion, making the world a better place. And yet here you are, belittling the very people who gave you that platform. What you've actually demonstrated, Savannah said evenly, is an astonishing level of self-absorption, disrespect, and a complete inability to handle a civil conversation when someone doesn't immediately agree with you. Harry's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had expected to charm, to control the narrative, to coast on his title and confidence. Instead, he found himself face to face with a journalist who wasn't the least bit intimidated, and who was holding him accountable in real time. "I don't think I have to sit here and be attacked," he muttered, beginning to rise from his chair. "Sit down," Savannah commanded. Her voice was calm, but carried such authority that Harry obeyed before he even realized it. "You started this," she continued, her tone steady and unflinching. "You came into my studio attacking me, this show, and the profession of journalism itself. You don't get to play the victim now that someone is responding with the same energy you brought in here." The power dynamic had flipped completely. The prince who had walked into the studio expecting deference now sat humbled before a woman who had clearly run out of patience for arrogance. "And another thing," Savannah went on, "if you think this is how Americans react to being bullied, you've seriously misjudged us. We don't bow to titles or pedigree. We judge people by their actions, their integrity, and how they treat others. And by those standards, your behavior today has been absolutely disgraceful." Harry swallowed hard, his attempt at composure crumbling. "I think perhaps we should end this interview," he said stiffly. "This isn't going the way either of us intended." "Oh no," Savannah replied, smiling, a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You wanted a meaningful conversation about difficult truths, remember? You said you wanted substance, not pleasantries. So here's a truth for you. Your behavior today has been that of a spoiled, entitled man who believes his title gives him the right to treat people however he wants. And here's another truth," she added, her voice now razor sharp. "That might be tolerated where you come from. It's not tolerated here." A heavy silence fell over the studio. You could almost hear the hum of the cameras capturing every second. Harry sat motionless, looking as if he'd been struck. Savannah, meanwhile, remained perfectly composed, the calm at the center of the storm. Finally, Harry rose again, this time with quiet anger. "I don't have to listen to this," he said, tearing off his microphone. "You're absolutely right," Savannah replied, unfazed. "You don't have to listen, but you did have to hear it. And so did everyone watching." She turned toward the production team. "Security will escort Mr. Windsor out." 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the set. Harry glanced around, perhaps hoping anyone would intervene. But every face he saw belonged to a crew member who had witnessed his arrogance firsthand. His exit was swift, undignified, and utterly silent. When he was gone, Savannah turned back to the camera, her composure fully restored. "Well, folks," she said smoothly, "that's not exactly how we plan to spend this segment. But journalism means holding people accountable for their words and actions, no matter who they are." She offered a professional smile. "We'll be right back after the break with the weather." The clip would go on to become the most talked-about television moment of the year, a masterclass in professionalism colliding with entitlement.